Hello, I'm George Abernathy. I'm the proud president of FreightWaves. I'm really excited that you're here joining us at the virtual Sales and Marketing Summit, and I'm joined today by one of our keynotes, Andrew Leto, the CEO and founder of Emerge. Andrew, thanks for doing this today.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having me.
It's really great to have Andrew with us. Andrew's had multiple successes within our space. Many of you will be aware of the names of the companies that he started and he grew and then he successfully exited. It's kind of the dream of many in the industry to do that once, and Andrew's been able to do it a couple of times. And I thought it would be great to have Andrew join us to talk about how the evolution of a company occurs in the sales and marketing process. And I think you're going to enjoy this because it's not totally conventional when Andrew's involved. Andrew, when he got out of the Navy, he became and started Global Trans, exited there in 2016, and then 10-4 grew from there, and then exited that in a successful sale in 2018, and now Emerge. So let's start there, Andrew. Let's talk a little bit. Give the folks who are joining us a little bit of a picture about Emerge, and then we can talk about the evolution of how you and your team are able to sell and market so successfully.
Great, thanks, George. Yeah, so when I first got in the industry, I started a truckload brokerage, as many of you know, and it's called Global Trans. It's actually across the street from Emerge. So I started that out of my bedroom when I was right out of the Navy and grew it for 15 years. And now it's over $1 billion freight brokerage, truckload brokerage. And when I was there, I saw that there was a need not being met in the market, and that need is on the shipper side, on how they go out and procure trucks. And so we focus at Emerge on procurement, technology for procurement, how shippers go match to trucking companies and brokers, and how to make it easier for shippers and carriers and brokers to connect digitally on the procurement side of it. So that's what we're doing at Emerge now. We're 3 years into it. Last year, thank God, I think we're all blessed to be in the freight business. Last year was bad for a lot of industries, but it wasn't bad for our industry. Everybody that I know did okay, if not grew. Trucking companies is a great time, the best time to be a trucking company. It's the best time to be a truckload brokerage with all the technology coming out. And I think this is going to be a good year. I feel confident that it's going to be a great year for freight.
I could not agree with you more, and I'm thankful to be in this space and to work with folks like you. Let's talk a little bit about the entrepreneur, founder, and how you're the chief salesperson basically when the thing starts, maybe the only salesperson, and then as you grow, you've got different constituencies that you're trying to sell, convince to believe in your company and buy from your company. So why don't you speak to that? Because I think there's some things that you've been able to do and think about how you do it that would really that would be relatable to the folks who are watching.
Yeah, as an entrepreneur, sales, you're really wearing. I look at myself, I have to wear 3 hats. And the first 2 hats you have to wear as a salesperson of your company is you have to find partners. In this industry, it's so important that when you have an idea and you start a company, the first people you're selling are people in our industry to back your idea and to validate it. And then the next thing you're selling, once you get some people behind your idea, that's why I think decks are so important still. I mean, we have to have decks about what you do, what makes you different. I think you have to be doing something different in this day and age. What makes, and there's so many things in our industry that, I mean, we're as far as technology, still the most backwards industry. It's not like the hotel industry where all the capacity is online, you just go buy it, right? That's just not how it works in any mode of transportation. So I believe that, when you first start a company, you're wearing multiple hats. You got to sell people on your vision. Then you got to sell investors to back your vision, because it costs a lot of money to market yourself with your idea, to get it out in the market. I always say you can't market your way to success in this industry, even though you have great tools now. FreightWaves didn't exist 5 years ago, so and even now you still can't just I have an idea and think that marketing without sales is gonna grow your company. It needs to be a part of it, but I think you have to still have some way to tap into whether it's who you're selling, whether it's shippers, brokers, or carriers. You have to have people to go sell that. So selling investors is very important. So you got to sell people, investors, then all while selling whoever your end user is, whether it's one of those three parties, the shipper, broker, or carrier. And how do you get your name out there, and how do you go market that to, what's your angle, and never think that your first idea is going to be the idea that's going to be around, that's going to be the company that makes it. So I'm always selling somebody, whether I'm selling an investor or someone to come on. As an entrepreneur now, I'm just selling people to come on and join me in my cause, because that's really how companies are built. It's a snowball. It starts with you and your idea. Then you get two or three partners behind it that will be willing to back it, that obviously have connections. You need people with connections. It's always good and have that industry expertise, and that's going to help you raise money. Obviously, when you have a team is so important to investors. And then all while honing in your idea, figuring out what you're selling, and if it works.
That's so true, and I think that as people take some drops of gold out of what we're talking about today, if you stop selling, and really no matter what role, right, Andrew? No matter what role, if you stop selling yourself, your company, you're not going forward. That snowball is not going to continue to grow, and that I think is really something. I mean, you talk about 15 years with Global Trans, and then 10-4, and now at Emerge, and you've had success and measured in a number of ways, and yet you're still selling, and you're still convincing folks that this next vision that you've had is the right thing to go after. So how do you implant that vision into the folks that are working behind you, that are making Emerge happen today?
Well, first, you have to have an angle that is different. I think that's the most important thing. If you're going to start, and what's nice, you can still start companies with any old school mentality. In this industry, we're so behind that you can start if you want to start a truckload broker today, you could still start a truckload broker and not have to have a different angle. But that's not going to build the enthusiasm of people around it. So, I think that's what I try to do. It's how do you make yourself different? How do you differentiate yourself in the market? Understanding all the angles, and I always am selling. I'm selling constantly, and the first 2 or 3 years of a company, you're mostly selling people to join you, and because you have to have in this, again, you can't start a company without a great team in our industry, because it's going to take a lot of people to get behind your idea, and then so I think that you still can't. Again, marketing is great, but that should be 90% of your budget for sales should be to people in our industry, because you have to be touching the shipper somehow. You need to tap into a network. I know companies that I've invested in the industry that have tapped into other sales networks. So you're either in this. But what's great though is the TMSs now are allowing. They're starting to be smarter about it, becoming more like a Shopify, where you could actually, Blue Yonder has this new product where you could tap in and have access to hundreds of shippers right away. So that's what's cool. I see happening right now, but we're still not there yet. It's still the TMS are still lagging the Shopifys of the world, but they're starting to catch on. Of hey, how do we use our big massive networks to help sales? Because that is otherwise still to this day you need to have hundreds of people to build $1 billion company or $100 million company in our industry. You have to have at least 50 salespeople, whether you're a 3PL carrier or a broker.
Yep. So I'm really intrigued by the, is there, because Global Trans, 10-4, here comes Emerge, what are the common themes that ran through those companies? And I think you're going to say people. And if it is people, how do you know when you're looking for the leadership, when you're looking for, the folks that you're surrounding yourself with to sell that company to your customers, to your partners? How do you figure out that those folks are the ones that you want to go to war with?
Well, in my industry, so we're selling shippers. We want shippers on our platform. So the only way to get to shippers is, like I said, you can't just market, have the greatest idea in the country. Like I say this all the time, if Star Trek, if the teleprompter, that teletransporter was invented, you still would have to go out. You can't just market, hey, now we can move freight through a teletransporter. You still have to go sell that to the companies because it's just the way it is. So in my business, my whole thing is how do I get more, at this point, now that I've gotten past the whole, who's my partners, I found my partners, I have a great team now. Investors, fine, we got that, that's a hump you have to get over. That even I had a challenge, even though I had 2 successes before getting it's the easiest time to be an entrepreneur and to get money ever, but it's still a hump that it's still difficult to get someone to back your idea. And then once you get that going, you have to figure out how you sell this. How do you get this out to the market? Marketing is a big part of it, but you can't just market. You have to have an angle, whether it's tapping into the TMSs, tapping into ELD providers. They're all, the data providers are starting to get real smart about it and seeing, hey, how do we make it cheaper for new startups to get their word out to companies? But, that's what I think about all day is how do we get more people selling? Now we have a great product, great platform. Now how do we get it out there? And there's tons of models in our industry. There's the agent kind of model where you could go to agents. There's just, you raise a lot of money and throw a lot of people on the phone. That works too, but you need a lot of money for that. You could tap into sales networks. You give a product to a company that has a massive sales force already. So you got to be thinking that if you can't raise a lot of money, you've got to find a better way to do it, whether that's an agent model, which is, you're pretty much getting free sales reps there, but you're giving a lot of future, of your future margin away if you're in our side of the business. But that's just what you got to do. You got to, what's your sales angle? What's your network? The greatest companies in our industry have, if you can't show me one of the top 20 that don't have a massive way to distribute their product.
And I think that's key, and I love that you brought that up, because sometimes, the great idea from the entrepreneur, and I'll say I've worked in some of these environments where you almost think that your product is so good that the people are going to come to you to get it. If you build it, they will come. They don't come. You got to go get it. And that I think being willing to try many different channels serves you very well. And if it doesn't work all that great, we'll emphasize it elsewhere. But you really have to be willing to say, I'll either give up a little bit of the money or I'll give up a little bit of something in order to just get that, that ball rolling to a point where you reach some sort of scale. And let me talk a little bit about that, Andrew, because you've built companies that are big, that are big now, were big when you sold them, and big now. At what point, and I know it's never going to always be science. There's always going to be some art in there. But at what point does the science come in and you start looking at and seeing that it's a repeatable model? Is there a size in our business? Is there a number of people? Or do you just know when you can look at the metrics and no, I've built the model now and now it's a repeatable thing?
Yeah, your cost of sales. I mean, if you once you start feeling like you have the product, the first 2 years of my company now Merge, if you talked to me 3 years ago and said, and we're doing great this year, I think we won the year at $500 million of a run rate revenue, up from 500 last year. But 3 years ago, if you asked me what is a Merge going to do, it was probably 50%. I probably had 50% of it baked out of what we were going to do. You have to constantly, for the first 5 years as an entrepreneur, and I'm not a big company guy. I'm a startup to, $500 million,
right.
$1 billion company. Then it's, to me, I like, because I like this is fun for me because it's the challenge. But your first few years, you just have to figure out your angle. And once you get to that point where it's like, wow, I have the product, now I just need the sales force. That's where I think we're at now. That's why we can scale finally in a much bigger way. But getting there that's the hard part. That took me 3 years, and this is my third company. And I feel like we're just right there now where we could start scaling because the products, it just takes time to develop. And during those 3 years, you're having to convince investors and those people backing your idea that this makes sense. So you're selling that. That was the first 3 years of Emerge. Is what is this? What am I selling? But also keeping the investors and my people behind me in my vision, which has totally changed. And I think you have to be able to back. If you're wrong, you have to know you're wrong right away. Whether it's with an executive hire, I see a lot of people you don't want to admit you're wrong, and I think that's the worst thing as an entrepreneur. You have to admit you're wrong at some point and then just change. And I'll do that like in a second. Oh my God, this is not working. I made a mistake. I don't think about it anymore. I just take care of whatever the problem is and then pivot that way. Company's not a straight line.
I think that's a great point, that you may throw something up against the wall, and if it doesn't stick, don't keep throwing it. Move on to the next one. I think that's a great point. One thing, I don't have that much more time, but one thing I wanted to talk about, because I can see behind you the operations floor of Emerge, and as you talk about, and we talked about you infusing your passion for Emerge and your belief into the folks that are out there. How important was it for you to bring them back into the office so that they're around one another, and does that make, for lack of a better term, rallying the troops easier in the model than when they were remote?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think you could, in this day and age, I could probably do what I'm doing now, and everybody could be remote. I mean, you have all the tools now there is to work virtually. I mean, thank God that what happened last year wasn't 5 years ago when we had to deal with companies like GoToMeeting. I mean, it would not have worked. Thank God Zoom came out when they came out. We use Slack. We use, I don't feel like we're on an island, but still having people in the buzz helps. Mm-hmm. I think it helps 20-30% better than what you could do if you didn't have, if you're working virtual. I think still, especially when you're building a company, I mean, it's important to be not Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting with your team, and actually be face to face at some point, especially with, not just the executive team, but anybody that's starting at the company.
Right. So last thing that I'll wrap up with, you talked about the cost of sale, and I think one of the things that folks need to take from this is, you've invested your time, you've invested time of other of your executives to build those relationships that will serve the business initially and then on an ongoing basis in ways that won't necessarily be seen in that cost of sale. You've figured out through relationships and others to find ways to help build that so that you can then put the sales team in, and they're not burdened with a massive marketing budget. And again, talking to a guy who likes to sell marketing to people, there's times where it's appropriate. It's absolutely appropriate to help be that foundational thing, and then what you leap off of and then grow from. But your multifaceted way of doing it is I think part of the reason that cost of sale can stay as low as it does.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in having multiple sales channels. I think you should tap into all three, which is tapping into sales organizations. If you're a trucking company, you go to 3PLs. But tapping into not just having inside sales, having outside sales, enterprise sales, agents, any way you could get your product to the shipper. If you're selling to shippers, if you're selling to carriers, how do you get your product to carriers? Ask yourself, who sells to carriers every day? How do I tap into that network? There's so many. And before I end, I know we got to end soon. I want to say, like, one of the biggest problems I see in our industry right now, as far as sales, is that in this day and age, and from the broker and carrier side, is we still have to buy freight. You still have to buy freight to get into a company. If you're a carrier, you have to go in 10% lower because no one knows, no one's met you before. So there's a huge, even though you could obtain customers in our industry, but then you have to be willing to even lose money because there's so much competition from the carrier and the broker. I mean, everybody in our industry at least has 10,000 competitors. So you think about it, which is crazy. Most people do. Only a few lucky ones only have one or two competitors, and they should be happy about that. But when you have so many competitors, you have to figure out how do you, what's a better way of just, because we still under a place where you have to buy freight. If you're a trucking company, if you're a broker, you have to buy freight. And that first year, you have to be willing to lose. And then, I would like to see, hopefully that changes in time. We get past that. I mentioned on a podcast this week, I thought a great idea for a company, I wish I had time to do it, is a company that does carrier scorecarding. Shippers were ratings, reviews on carriers and brokers, carrier scorecarding. There's so many great angles. And I also want to mention this is the best time ever to be an entrepreneur, especially in our industry. I think the money's starting to really, it flowed in big in the last 2 or 3 years, but it's only getting better. The market's topped off right now too. So a lot of that money's going to start flowing back and keep going into private equity. I've noticed just in the last few days, I'm getting a lot more calls from investors. And that was it dried up a little bit last year. They wanted to see where the market went. So, now's the time to raise money if you can. Our industry's starting to heat up. It seems like, 10 years ago, if you had an idea, you couldn't get funding. Now, anybody can get funding as long as the idea makes sense. And there's so many things in our industry that I wish that we could just buy and not build. Carrier scorecarding is one of them.
Right.
Connecting to carriers, so many new companies doing it, but there's room for it. There's, trying to find trucks is still the hardest thing in our industry to do, is finding capacity. But I think this year is gonna, I think it's gonna not get any worse than it was, unless. But I think because I already feel it's starting to loosen up a lot of areas, so I think it's going to get easier this year to find capacity. But I think just this whole idea of buying freight, I wish that someone needs to change that, and because you still have to go buy freight. So you not only have to have sales and marketing, but you have to go buy it if you're in the carrier broker business, which I hope in the next few years changes. Because that's why you see all these digital brokers, why they burn 200, 300 million a year, is because they have to go buy to grow, to scale that fast. They're buying a lot of freight. So how do we change that? And so there's so many ways. And like I said, a carrier scorecarding company. There's a ton of anything that you're doing in your job during the day, and I'm speaking just as an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. You could probably find 5 things that you do in whatever role you're in, whatever side of the business you're in, that you're like, wait, why is it done this way? And if you could say that, and then now's the best time ever to say, I could fix this. And if I fix it for my company, who else can how many other companies can I fix this for?
I think you've hit on that. That's so key and critical. And when we talk about marketing, there's only so many Andrew Letos out there that you've done it a couple of times. You've got some cred. There's a lot of folks that have that idea and are trying to figure out, how do I differentiate myself? How do I get noticed? Hey, look at me over here. I'm trying to figure this out. And I will say, at FreightWaves, it's one of the best things we get to see is those companies coming to these different events and showing their wares. And one of the proudest things for me is these companies come in, they do their demos, they're seen by the investment community, and they end up getting money. And that's the ultimate. That's where the industry will continue to evolve and to change. But boy, we're lucky to be in it because there is so much opportunity. So I want to finish up by thanking Andrew. Thank you to all the people behind you at Emerge for letting us take a little bit of your time today. Thanks to everyone who's watching. Enjoy the balance of our Sales and Marketing Virtual Summit. I'm George Abernathy. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it.